Nicole and I often get accused of living in 2035 while everyone is still in 2025, and we're trying to pull people into 2035. And I think that if you can take these baby steps of getting to the future and just trying to think a little bit outside of the box, then you can have a little bit more fun in your every single day. So, what are some of the wildest creative ideas that you've always wanted to do but have never gotten approval for? These are the things that I want you to drop into the chat. What do you really, really want to do? Do you want your CEO skydiving out of a plane or dress like Elvis skydiving out of a plane? Do you want your CEO to be willing to wear sequins like Nicole does everywhere she goes? What are the craziest things that aren't super crazy? Maybe not the skydiving from a plane, but maybe wearing sequins that you can just push a teeny tiny bit and get those boundaries a little bit forward. So my friend Henry Coutinho-Mason is here, and he has a company called Future Forward. So when we talk about the future, it's not as much the wild ideas as it is the wild ideas that will turn into what our world is going to become. So Henry, what have you got for us today? Because you've been doing a whole lot of stuff about what the future holds, and we've been talking industry trends, but you're talking, what are you talking?
Hey Liz, nice to see you. And actually, the title of the book is actually Future Normal,
Future normal.
um, and that's I guess kind of a nice starting point. So we just missed each other. I was in Austin earlier this week, and I took my first Waymo, which was really
You
exciting.
did. Did you? How did it go? Because I had an event where the CEO was late to my event because he got in a Waymo that was behind a car that was double parked and it didn't know to go around. And he was like, they're not perfect
Ah,
yet. How did it go for you?
for me, it was super seamless, actually, right? And that was part of why I mention it in the context of a conversation we're going to have, and really the whole reason why me and Rohit, who I think you've also had at one of your Club Itchy events as well, my co-author Rohit
I
Bhargava,
have.
we wanted to call the book The Future Normal because it was centered on this idea that so much of the conversations, you joked in the intro, right? Living in 2035. And we love to imagine that 2035 will be this kind of magically different place. And actually, the most interesting futures switch from mind blowing to mundane kind of in a few seconds, right? And that was my experience of the Waymo. Like, you get in, and I was being a proper tourist, and I was filming it, arriving and taking photos, and I saw some guy smile on the sidewalk walking past me, like, who is this guy? It's obviously his first one. And then the third one I took, after a couple of days, I'm like, okay, you just get in and you kind of don't think about it. And I think that to bring this to the context of everyone watching this who's much more in the event industry, I often start my presentations when I'm talking about the future, whether it's to event people or finance people or healthcare people, whatever. There's a great Jeff Bezos quote, which is, everyone, he was being interviewed on a stage, and the journalist was kind of saying the same thing, right? Jeff, like, what does the future of retail in 2035 look like? Drones, facial recognition, biometrics, like all the sexy stuff we love to talk about when it's the future. And he stopped her and he said, it's fascinating. I'm always asked this question, what's changing? But no one ever asked me the other side of that coin, which is what isn't changing. And he said, for me and my leadership team at Amazon, this is the more interesting question, right? Because the things that don't change are the things that we build our business around, and he joked, we know with absolute confidence, like, no matter what technologies we're using at Amazon, 2035, 2055, right? 2100, it doesn't matter. No customer's going to run up and be like, Jeff, I love Amazon, but I wish I had higher prices and slower delivery times. These are the things that will always remain constant. And so when I look at the future and when I'm thinking about the future, it's always this combination between, what are the sexy new innovations, what are the sexy new technologies, whether that's AI and all the other stuff, but how do they speak to the very fundamental human needs that won't change? So, when it comes to events, like when I was in Austin, I was talking with Amazon and their event team, and we were seeing, like, the things that are not going to change. People come to events to learn, to connect, and potentially to create, right? And I think that third one we can talk about later because I don't think it happens at all. But we gather people for a reason. And as I said, maybe it's educational, maybe it's cultural, or maybe it's a strategic reason. So how can we use some of these shiny new technologies to help people do those things that have been, central to the event industry for 30, 50, 100 years, right? That's not going to change. But how can
Yeah.
we do them better?
Yeah, I think that's the thing is this technology kind of bubble that we can maybe couch ourselves in so that we don't notice it. That's what we're all kind of hoping for. I mean, there's the crazy stuff that you do want, like the meta glasses that when you walk around, it actually pops up kind of like the Sims, the 3 people you have in common on LinkedIn so that you can create connections that way. Sure, there's that. But then there's the stuff where it's you got there in a Waymo, you didn't have to worry about parking or doing anything else. And you kind of walked in and it recognized you Minority Report style. So you knew exactly who you were and where you were going. And you can kind of feel that so that you can focus on the people. So that's kind of that crazy, crazy future that I see. I worry about some of the things though, because once we get self-driving cars and autonomous, all these things, then we no longer have our roadside motels and the reasons people stop for those things. And so when I think of the hospitality industry and things like that at large, those are my concerns with technology. So how do you kind of allay our concerns in that? It's the, oh, it's okay, people will find jobs, but will they? Or can we all just sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais because the robots are doing it all?
Look, I also on LinkedIn I quite often call myself a reluctant futurist because I joke, when I'm in a kind of psychedelic carpeted patterned conference room at one of these events, I say, look, if I could really predict the future, I wouldn't be talking to you about it here, right? I'd be lying on my hammock, having traded Bitcoin for the past 15 years. So look, there is a part of me that says the future is unknowable. And actually, the second order implications of some of these technologies are super hard to predict. The joke I always give is, if you have mobile and GPS and cameras, right, it's probably not too much of a stretch, sticking with mobility, to think about Lime and Uber and Whimo, right? It's probably a lot harder. I'm sure someone did predict it, but to predict Tinder and Grindr, right, and the kind of the social, behaviors that some of these new technologies unlock.
Well, and I think it's for me less about the predictions and worrying about any of that, because that'll just get you terrified. I'm thinking, how do we prepare as workers, as professionals, as event people, as humans? What do we need to be thinking about? So Kyle over here was advocating earlier that everybody needs to learn AI and have a whole suite of AI agents doing all the things for you. That feels a little far for someone like me. So what are those baby steps that we can take toward 2035 that make us feel a little bit more comfortable that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, the thing that I'm really excited about when it comes to AI is, less that everyone needs to kind of learn agentic workflows. I think it's a bit like digital, right? It's, of course, everyone now has a base level of competence, which is way beyond what people had 20 years ago. But the truth is, not everyone needs to know how to do pivot tables in spreadsheets, right? It's important for accountants and finance people. But if you're, much more on the marketing side, then, you're going to know social media and marketing in that sense. And I suspect a lot of this complexity will be abstracted away, right? The beauty of AI, right, is it's an incredibly democratizing technology. And that, I think, we're kind of bouncing around all over the place. But the thing that I've been spending a lot of my time doing over the past year or so, and we actually did together at your Brains Not Bots event a few months ago, was I've built my own little interactive AI experience that I do with audiences. And I say I've built it, right? I had a developer build it with me, right? And in theory, maybe you could vibe code it. But interestingly, one of the first conversations I had with someone about it was Tahira and Dean from IMEX, which is where we met, right? Actually lived. And it was funny. I got introduced to her, and when you get introduced to someone, the kind of the sometimes you forget why you've been introduced, right? So we get on this call and we're talking, and halfway through the conversation, she was like, "This is kind of cool." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I thought you were just another event tech vendor come to pitch me some AI solution." And I heard a little bit of your previous conversation, and you were saying there's so many products. And I stopped her and I said, no, like I'm a speaker who's just found a way to do something with AI that I think is really interesting in the context of my micro world, right? It's not a product that I'm selling to people. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll get there in the future. But that's the thing, right? I've built this, and that initial first iteration was, a few days of a developer's time, right? So we're talking, like a couple of $1,000s. And the ability to see something, and this is what I'm really bullish on, right? Of course, there will be a bunch of solutions, and sometimes that will be the right thing to go down, the right route to go down. But I also think there's a huge opportunity for people to experiment and say, like, build, whether it's an AI agent, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, but just build a little micro instance artifact, whichever platform you're using, they all have different names, that just solves a really small problem for you. And I think that's really exciting. And I think that the blossoming, let's draw a parallel back. We were talking about social media earlier. Anyone can go on Instagram, right? Anyone can go on TikTok. Like, does that make everyone a video producer? In some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. In many ways, no, right? Professionals, there are still professionals, and they do incredible things. You've got the Mr. Beast at the top end, right? Doing the amazing, like, high production, value videos. 99.999% of videos on YouTube are kind of terrible and will probably never ever be watched, right? And that's probably the same with AI, right? Most uses of AI will be very ephemeral and probably pretty terrible. But I think it's about, again, it's not about the technology. It's about the problem that it is you're trying to solve, or the job you're trying to do, whether that's for your audience, for yourself, for your colleagues, for your boss, whatever. So I think we can be very ambitious, but also very unambitious at the same time, if that makes sense, right? Like, not everything has to be transformed by a single tool or a single platform. But I think cumulatively, the collective imagination and creativity of the entire industry, scratching our own itches, I think that's where it will get really interesting.
Is it kind of a remix of nostalgia and bringing things back to the humanity? I mean, this is what we hear Elon and Sam and all the guys saying, that it is events are the one place where you can actually get the non-AI stuff from a human-to-human conversation, and that it's legit, that it's real and authentic, which of course has created a proliferation in the number of events that we're seeing in the world, which of course means there are now way more events that anyone would ever go to, which means that the 20% of people who actually went to events are now having to pick from 4,000 events instead of 3, which means that nobody's going to events anymore. At least that's how it feels. So, as we're trying to extrapolate the math on how do you make an event something that people want to go to and that isn't just AI generated content you could have watched on TV. I mean, I think that's where, as we think of readiness for our industry, what are we doing at these events that's bringing the future, but also, like you said, the things that don't change? Like, Nicole and I do these events with sticky notes and Sharpie markers, and everybody wants us to bring tech into it, and we refuse. People just want to see the wall of these things.
No, I hear you, and I was always very resistant to tech until I found this use case that I feel has genuine utility and value. And I'll come back to that in a second, but I just want to pick up on something else you said there. You talked about the oversaturation of events. Like, I always think back to one of my friends, his dad was like offered one of the first coffee franchises in the UK, like, kind of Seattle coffee company, like almost pre-Starbucks. And he was like, who's going to pay £3 or, $5 or whatever, translation for a coffee, right? It seemed
if he could have
alien.
looked into the future.
Exactly, right. And he always jokes, he was like, it was the worstest business decision he ever made, right? But he couldn't imagine it. And so I think, there were maybe a transition point, but I wouldn't worry about the oversaturation of events, because, like you said, I think people will crave humanity and reality, and in the same way, there's another slide I use a lot in my presentations talking about the finance function. Like, spreadsheets automated a large amount of the jobs that bookkeepers do,
right?
But there are way more people employed in finance now than there were pre-spreadsheets, right? Actually, it expands the industry. Like, we do more finance, but it's more complex finance, and it's actually, more creative and higher paid finance. So that's going back to your jobs point.
That is like that.
Yeah, but look, if you're a 60-year-old bookkeeper, the year spreadsheets are released, like, to your point, that is problematic for you as an individual, and we need, to figure that out as a society. Yeah. But in the macro sweep, it expands the market, right? So I do think there'll be huge opportunities. Having said that, though, back to the nature of events, we discussed this briefly on LinkedIn. I think, event professionals, it's not okay, and you won't get away with saying, like, okay, well, everyone's flocking to events now in this post-AI world, so, like, people are going to run in through the doors, right? You need to think about how you can use AI to enhance the attendee experience, and also the experience for the organization or community or association who are organizing this event. Right? You have to deliver more. And
Yeah.
I discussed earlier about learning, connecting, and creating. I think, the learning experience for attendees is about to be absolutely transformed. I'm in love with Google Notebook LM, that many of your viewers may be familiar with, but the ability to put in, 50 different PDFs, spreadsheets, whatever it is, data sources, right? So you could have all of the content that was presented on stage dropped into a notebook or an equivalent platform. And then, in seconds, you can create infographics, and you can create video walkthroughs and flashcards and quizzes, right? And so that ability for someone to interrogate the content that they hear at an event, and to do that afterwards, I think that's really exciting. The connection, we've already discussed this briefly, but you said smart glasses, but I think the ability to use AI to matchmake people in like so much infinitely preferable ways to the terrible AI matchmaking that there is today, where it's like scraping your LinkedIn and you just know that a bunch of vendors are going to come try and sell to you with this kind of very blunt, like unpersonalized message. Like, hey, I see you're at whatever, like CES, let me buy you a coffee and try and sell you stuff. And then the creation piece. I'm just super excited for, because this is what I'm investing my career in really at the moment, which is the ability to ask hundreds of people in 5 or 10 minutes for their input, and to be able to synthesize that and aggregate it and extract real strategic insights from a room of 300 or 400 people. It's like Mentimeter or Slido on steroids, and we can do it in some really fun, creative ways. So I think that the job that an event can do for an organization or community, we should be thinking 10x what it is today.
Yeah. That's incredible. And I love the optimistic view of the future. I think this is great. I think there's been a lot of trepidation and hesitation this year as things have really exploded. And so to have it put into context of, this is going to expand our industry, this is going to expand our minds, this is going to allow us to do more creative things and focus on even the more human aspect of things. So Henry, how can people follow you and find you to learn more about how they should prepare for the future?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. LinkedIn is pretty much my go-to platform. So luckily, I think I'm the only Henry Coutinho-Mason on the whole platform. So I'm pretty easy to find. So I'd love to connect with anyone watching.
But thank you so much for hanging out with us a little bit today, and we will talk to you very soon. Have an amazing weekend.
I mean, Henry was awesome, wasn't he? I mean, his insights and his perspective, and I love the point that he made about how spreadsheets, increased jobs, right? Because it's true, right? I was listening to the CEO of NVIDIA the other day, and he was talking about how he doesn't even know where AI is going to take things. And this is a person who's at the top of the game. So, there's a lot of nervous energy about what AI is going to do to events and to our industry, and, and all those things. But I think we have to be cautiously optimistic about the whole thing, and really be positive and look for those opportunities to create new jobs and ways of doing things.